and fall for the trick she did. That was the last time she ever saw her rings.
It must have been devastating when you realized.
Oh, I just wept. But what could I do about it? The police couldn't do anything. The lawyer couldn't do anything. Nothing.
Most likely, the rings ended up here, on the Lower East Side, where just about anything you can steal is up for a quick sale. No questions asked. But police got a break from a hospital security camera. Just one blurry shot, but it was enough to identify the thief. Tracy Kaza, a 47-year-old chronic offender with 74 convictions. Again, mostly theft. But Kaza has a specialty, preying on the elderly. Detective Tyrone Douglas.
Kaza is part of the revolving door, this chronic offender. When you see that kind of thing happening, what goes through your mind?
I mean, there's frustration, but we try our best to just kind of keep our hand on it, a handle of it.
Handling Kaza means Douglas and his colleagues show up for every court appearance, tracking Kaza's progress through the system.
As long as I've known him, I don't think he's been out of jail probably more than 4 or 5 weeks between committing the crimes and actually getting jail time and or breaching those offenses within days of being released.
Kaza's long history of crime was an eye-opener for Agnes's grandchildren, Jason and Marjorie Dudletts.
When you heard that this guy was no stranger to the Vancouver Police Department, what thoughts went through your mind?
Complete anger, just complete anger. After we heard how many times he'd been arrested, convicted into his 50s or 60 times, we had nothing to say. We realized at that point that the system doesn't work, and the only real way to do anything was hopefully he'd get out and we'd just run into him somewhere.
Despite his 74 previous convictions, Kaza was sentenced to just 14 months for stealing the rings. But with time served counted as double time while awaiting trial, he only spent 1 day in jail after he was convicted.
So he was virtually out right away?
Well, yeah, he basically served his time and pled guilty and served 1 more day in jail.
Not much for robbing a helpless grandmother. The Dudletts were outraged.
The judges, I think, should be more accountable. I think we should be interviewing them. They should have their faces plastered on the front page of the newspaper and asking them why they're letting these prisoners out so many times. Why are they letting the prisoners walk free? Why are they letting these habitual criminals free all the time? Like after 10 convictions, you'd think, okay, this guy's a bad guy. He should be locked up for a long time.
And when Kaza's not locked up, he's here on the streets of Vancouver. And there's only one way for him to feed his drug habit. Sooner rather than later, he'll find a new victim to steal from. Mid-morning on Vancouver's Lower East Side. The Chronic Offenders Unit is out trawling, on the hunt for long-term criminals who steal millions of dollars worth of property a year to feed their drug habits.
Somebody told me red top, black pants.
They've got arrest warrants for offenders on their list, and some of them have been seen in the area. This guy wasn't on the list.
He had some stuff that he says he found.
But the amount of crack cocaine and OxyContin they find in his backpack means he likely will be. And the courts appear to be doing very little to stop him. Vancouver Police Chief James Chu.
If someone is drug addicted, goes into jail for just 1 week, 2 weeks, they come out, they're still drug addicted, and they're still going to commit the crimes. And that's why we see, that's why the courts are so busy, because the revolving door just spins faster. What we'd like to see is more purposeful sentencing, offenders that go into jail for more lengthy periods of time.
One would think that the courts would come down hard on someone who keeps committing crime after crime, racking up dozens and in some cases more than 100 convictions. Logic would dictate that for these chronic offenders, the sentences would get longer and longer. While in Vancouver, that just isn't so. A study for the Vancouver Police Department found that the more convictions, the shorter the sentence. Released in 2008, the study also found that 87% of all chronic offenders were sentenced to less than 6 months in jail, and only 3% were given sentences longer than 1 year. Those dismal statistics were a shock to police.
We suspected it, but to see it verified, it was actually dumbfounded us. We said, how can this be? And I actually shared that with some pretty high-level decision makers, including some judges. One judge I shared that with said he couldn't believe it either. He asked me to show him the data. I said, okay, I'll send you the records. And I never did hear back from that judge.
Never heard back from that judge. But a retired judge in Vancouver is willing to speak out in public. And what he says about his former colleagues on the bench is not flattering.
I'd say the sentences imposed by the judges are a mockery of reality.
Judge Wallace Craig presided over the court in downtown Vancouver for more than 20 years. His solution to the problem of chronic offenders is simple.
Jail them and put them in. If they have a significant record, they should do the maximum. And when they get released, if they do it again, give them another maximum. And eventually they'll learn that you can't keep on stealing.
But you'll also hear the critics say, if you get tough or tougher on crime, you're just going to fill prisons.
And that's exactly what we should do. Because what the hell are they trying to tell us about prisons? There has to be a price paid for a crime. Because the answer, or for the criminals, it is simply, they can afford to commit crimes. Why should they stop when there is no punishment?
Why indeed? But here's a twist. A chronic offender who actually wants to spend more time in jail. Kenneth Gates is 37 years old. He has 40 criminal convictions, 23 years in and out of prison.
How many houses do you think you've broken into in your life?
In my life, probably 1,000.
1,000?
1,000 homes, yeah.
You're addicted to drugs?
Crystal meth, cocaine, heroin.
To feed your drug addiction, you're breaking into homes?
Yeah.
How much are your drugs costing you a day?
A day, anywhere from $50 to $150 to $300 a day, depending where I'm at and how safe I'm feeling.
You ever think about the families, the victims of the houses that you broke into and the violation and anger they feel?
Yes, lots of times. That's why I turned myself in.
Turned himself in after half a lifetime of drugs and crime. Asked for a long sentence, 3 years in a federal prison. And he doesn't want parole. He believes that in a federal jail, he's got a better chance of shaking his drug habit.
I felt that they would have programs to offer me. They would have, I've done federal time twice before. They were short, the shortest possible sentence, which was 2 years each time. And they had better programs. You have a more successful chance of getting your life together.
But once he's out, he's got nowhere to go but back to Crime Central on Vancouver's Lower East Side.
But to have a chance at success, you can't go back to the Lower East Side because that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, I don't know about that, because I also have my whole family lives down there.
Yeah, but you have all the temptations of drugs, of alcohol, of...
I'm going to have that in any city I go to. There's going to be a skid row wherever I go.
The temptations are great.
We got a fellow down there.
But Detective Warren Pomeroy and his colleagues in the Chronic Offenders Unit are optimistic that Gates can turn himself around.
We received letters from Kenny. He tells us that he's about 8 months clean now. At the 1 year mark, we plan on attending the institute. They're going to have a small ceremony. And when you think about a fellow that's been addicted for 20 plus years, it's amazing to think that he can go 1 full year clean.
A success story? Perhaps, but the Chronic Offenders Unit is having an effect.
We've seen about a 10% drop in property crime over the last several years, and that just shows you how astronomically high our property crime levels were. So they are making a dent. There's a lot more room that is there for improvement,